Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipson. Today's guest is Michelle Webb. She is the Commercial Director for NFL UK, where she is responsible for the partnerships and new business. Michelle and I were talking about the interest for NFL outside of the United States, her experiences from the Olympic Games, and what we can look forward to in regards to NFL in the UK the upcoming years. Michelle Webb, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
You are the Commercial Director for NFL UK. Could you tell us what this role includes?
Sure. So I've been with the NFL based in the London office since April 2017. I joined as Director of Partnerships, and that role was encompassing management of all current partners, which included local partners and global partners. And I had a team to support with the day-to-day delivery of that. In November last year, I got the role and promotion to Commercial Director, and that encompasses partnerships, but also new business. So any revenue generating aspects of the business sits under me. And I have a great team to support me with the outreach and acquisition of new partners that we can support. And then, as I said, we've got the partnership managers that help with the day-to-day delivery as well.
That sounds very interesting.
It is. It's a lot to try and achieve, but we're getting there.
When talking about NFL, National Football League, most people probably think about the United States. Could you explain the difference between NFL in the US and NFL in the UK?
Yeah. So the NFL UK, based in London, is one of the international offices. So the primary difference is that we're responsible for the growth of the sport, particularly the fandom and fan growth outside of the US. And it's our responsibility to ensure that we try and engage as many people as possible, get them interested in the sport from grassroots all the way up to the elite level. There are 5 international territories that our international office in New York is responsible for. That includes Canada, Mexico, London, and Germany, encompassing Europe, Australia, and China. And that sits with that international team. And then the primary difference between the global team, which is domestic driven in 345 Park Avenue, is that they're responsible for the growth in the US.
I see. How is it to work for American football in a country that more or less founded soccer or European football?
I'm not the biggest football fan, if I'm honest, and my husband isn't pleased with that because I only let him watch his team. But I've always loved sport, and I have been pretty fortunate in my career. I used to work for a sports management agency called Octagon and got in through an internship with them working on cricket. And then I was with them for about 2.5 years. And I would highly recommend anyone who wants to get into the industry going through agency route in the first instance, predominantly because you get exposed to so many different accounts, so many different sports, entertainment properties. And so in that 2.5 years, I was very fortunate to work across a number of different accounts. Cricket was my core, but I also got to work across Vodafone Live Music, a little bit of MasterCard Champions League, which is when my husband became my best friend again. And then also HSBC eventing, a little bit of golf. So I would highly recommend people focus on an agency route in the first place. And then I progressed into a role working for a governing body under Fast Track, working with British Athletics in a sponsorship manager role. I did an indoor and outdoor season with them. My role there was predominantly looking after the partners and making sure that their rights were delivered. And then I got really lucky and approached for a role in 2010 to work for the British Olympic Association, otherwise known as Team GB. And I had an incredible 7 years working with them. I got to work across the home London 2012 Olympic Games. I went across to Sochi for a Winter Olympic Games and then finished on a high at Rio when Team GB came second in the medal table. And then I felt like I had done the whole cycle. So a home games and a winter games and a summer games. And I was ready for my next challenge. And in February, I got approached for the role of Director of Partnerships of the NFL. And I felt like that was a good next step. It's hard to compete against the Olympics. And I always look at a CV and try and identify, okay, what makes sense? What is the right next step to do? And I had done agency and I didn't really want to go back there. I really enjoy a rights holder environment. And so I was lucky and got the job at the NFL. It took me a while to get my head around American football. I wasn't really a fan. I just knew that they were a big juggernaut in the US and hugely successful from a commercial point of view. So I thought I could learn a lot from the role. And then I managed to get my head around it, and I'm a big supporter of it now.
Your experiences from the Olympics sounds really amazing. Could you elaborate a bit on how it was to work for the London Olympics and also compare it how it is to work for an home Olympics versus the one you worked for in Sochi and Rio, for example?
The home Olympics is very special. There is nothing that I think will compare to that experience. For those that don't really understand the Olympic movement or the environment, when you win the opportunity to host an Olympic Games, an organising committee is set up. And they predominantly own the territory and the rights, and the NOC, which is a National Olympic Committee, which is the British Olympic Association, kind of takes a bit of a back step. That was the case in the UK. And our role was in terms of looking after the athletes. That's the point of differentiation. And from a commercial point of view, we're trying to do more around the athletes. So we looked at hosting a Team GB house, which is the athlete environment for the friends and family as well, that they can come to relax and celebrate some of those occasions. And then we hosted a number of fundraising events, and we had fan zones. And my role specifically in London 2012, I was very, very lucky. I worked with British Airways, and they were my main account really with Team GB at that time, and they had a Park Live stage, and as part of our agreement with them, it was my responsibility to deliver medal winners to that stage. So I got the best of both worlds. I could go into the village, pick up the athlete, they were on a high because they've just won a medal, bring them to the Park Live stage, which is in the middle of the Olympic Park, and celebrate with all the fans. It was an incredible experience, and the fandom and atmosphere was like nothing I had ever experienced before. It was electric and gives you those goose pimples, and that's the moments and experience that I think I will cherish forever. And also, I don't know how many people have traveled to London, but London was a really nice city. Like, you could get on the tube and people were talking to you rather than sitting in silence. It was just everything about those 17 days was electric, and those memories and experiences will provide me forever. And then to answer your second question about how does it different when you travel to an away games, you don't have as much control, obviously, and you are finding your feet in that city. You do a number of recce's. So before the Olympic Games take place, you go to the city, you find like your hospitality venue, you try and acclimatize to that environment, but you're always a little bit behind. You're always trying to play a bit of catch up because you're not used to that culture or the environment, or there's a language barrier. And so that is always a little bit of a hurdle. From a games operation and athlete performance perspective, I think we're really proud of how we conducted ourselves in terms of trying to find those marginal games, that little bit extra, and create a home away from home. And our chef de mission, which is responsible for the Team GB athletes during Olympic Games, was very good at ensuring that they were all protected in a positive way and shielded from any negative press or any situations that they found themselves to be in, because for many, it could be their first Olympic game. And so performing on a world-class stage with thousands of athletes in the same environment can be distracting. So a lot of time and attention was put into making sure that our athlete block was a home away from home and they felt comfortable within it.
That sounds like an amazing experience.
Yeah, very, very incredible.
If we look at it from the commercial perspective, and you mentioned British Airways, I know you've also partnered with Adidas. Could you explain the process of how to get these partnerships?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit easier to work with brands that have an integrated role with the property. So Adidas, they were providing all the kit for the athletes. And so having a conversation with them to get them on board, and they've been a partner for the Olympics for a number of years, isn't such a hurdle or a challenge. And I think attention switches to the athletes probably closer to the Olympic Games. So a lot of the commercial agreements that we were doing was probably last minute than we wanted to, but working with global brands that are endemic to the property is definitely the preferred direction. It makes it authentic, incredible, and then working with them to try and ensure that they're actually activating all of the rights that they're doing. And with the property as big as the Olympics, you need to kind of handhold them through it, make sure that they have a team that understands all of the complexities, some of the regulations that the International Olympic Committee put in place, but seeing it be executed once you've done all of the hard work, you put the contract together, you've discussed how you're going to activate and create a really compelling campaign, and then seeing it on the other side is really, really rewarding.
I'm sure it is. Looking at your career, multiple Olympics, the NFL UK and more, together with a degree in sports business, is this a career path that you have always wanted?
I did. Sport has always been a passion. I was one of those crazy people growing up that swimming was my sport, and I was swimming 10 times a week. So I was doing the early mornings, going to school, doing some after school matches, and then going back in the pool. And then my weekends would consist of competitions. A lot of my friends thought I was crazy, but I really enjoyed it. And sport was always a key feature for me. And so that prompted my choice to go to university to study sport. I didn't necessarily know at that time what I wanted to get into. I really liked sports journalism, and I did some work experience with the local paper growing up. But I didn't know where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. So I thought combining sport, a passion point, with business would be a strong choice and hopefully set me up on the right path. And I left university and I knew I wanted to travel. I'm not a kind of gap year, go away and travel with a backpack kind of girl. So I applied to an internship that was taking place in Sydney, which was teaching swimming. So using my past experience in the pool, I gained an international teaching qualification that enabled me to do that. And initially it was just going to be a 6 weeks teaching experience in Sydney, and they helped set you up with accommodation and gave you the initial introduction with the company. And the place that I was working was the University of New South Wales. So they had an amazing pool, and I was teaching from water babies up to like 15, 16-year-olds. And I ended up staying there for about 8 months and became a proper Australian. Like, I lost my accent, and having to teach swimming to little children, they couldn't understand me when I said, "Can you show me your front crawl arms?" So I had to translate into bubble arm, breathing arm. And then I was like, well, I don't know what to do next. Like, I know my visa is coming to an end, but I don't particularly want to leave Sydney. And one evening, beach cricket over there is such a huge thing. And I remember seeing Octagon plastered around the perimeter boards of the beach cricket field. And so I Googled Octagon, and they had an office in Sydney. And I emailed them and said, I would love to work for you. Are there any opportunities? Happy to do it on a voluntary basis. And fairly, I think they recognised that my visa was coming to an end, but they encouraged me to apply to the London office. I didn't live in London back home. I'm originally from the countryside, and the thought of moving to a big city wasn't that appealing. But I applied anyway, and I got an internship in the May. So I left. I had about 2 months left on my visa, so I went travelling around New Zealand. I finished on a high in the Cook Islands, and then I came back and got straight into London life and Octagon. And the rest is kind of history.
And it has taken you all the way to the NFL UK.
It has.
Talking about the NFL UK, the plan is to host 4 NFL games each year in the UK, right?
Correct, yeah.
How is the atmosphere at these games, and how is the interest from the British people?
It's incredible. It's actually blown my mind how many fans we have in the UK and more broadly across Europe. Germany is actually our biggest market from a fandom perspective, but we've made a strong commitment to continue playing games in London. We first played our game in 2007, and something that differentiates us from others is the fact that our games aren't exhibition games. They actually count, they matter towards the season. So a team is giving up a home game within their own environment in the US to come over and play in London. And we're proud of the fact that we've entered into a partnership with Tottenham to create a bespoke NFL stadium. And if anyone has had the opportunity to go, I'm sure they will agree that it is incredible. The digital and technology that the guys at Tottenham have put in place is very impressive. And we're pretty proud of the fact that the facilities that we have from an NFL perspective are totally bespoke and unique to us. So as an example, a locker room, a changing room, we have our own changing rooms separate from Tottenham. And that our changing rooms, the home changing room especially, can probably accommodate 200, 250 people. We had a kickoff party with influencers and guests in there last year. And then we've got our own field underneath Tottenham field. So it's a retractable pitch, and that's impressive. And it means that it goes untouched. We're not worried or concerned about Tottenham playing their games because it's safeguarded underneath. So I would encourage everyone to go to a Tottenham game, but we also play in the iconic Wembley Stadium. And so those games sell out pretty quickly. So Tottenham, we could have probably sold Tottenham capacity, which is about 65,000, about 5 times over. And Wembley, everyone loves to come to Wembley. It's the home of soccer, football, and that's about an 85,000 capacity, and we sell out there every single year. Predominantly about 85% is made up of UK fans, and about 15 to 20% is made up of the rest of the world.
Okay, so people are actually traveling from other countries to come watch the games.
Yeah, it's impressive, and they are fans of all of the teams. It's kind of irrelevant which teams are playing. I think everyone just wants to embrace the Americana, and we put on quite a show, and I think that's quite unique to us. As an example, our games last 3 hours, as probably people know, and so you've got to be pretty dedicated and committed to sit through that. But you have the opportunity to get up from your seat. You can bring food and drink back into the stadium. But the unique part of our game is that we open the gates probably about 4 or 5 hours before kickoff. And I remember attending my first game going, oh, that's going to be a really long day. Like, when you're working it, it's probably a 12-hour day. And I was like, do people really want to come and see what we have to offer at 4 or 5 hours before? There were people queuing to get into our fan zone, which is great from a commercial perspective, because it means the dwell time that fans have with those brands, activating and enjoying some of the experiences they have to offer, is incredible and incredibly engaging. And then shop sales, that helps as well. So it is very much a family day out, and it's non-tribalistic. So there isn't really that rivalry that you find in soccer and in English football. And that's something that I think is really appealing as a sport as well.
Sadly, this year, there won't be any games in the UK due to the COVID-19. Mm-hmm. How will this affect your job and the NFL UK?
We made the decision not to play any international games. So we play games in London and Mexico internationally. And we made the decision in early May to not play international games. And at the time I was thinking, oh gosh, maybe we've gone too early. But in hindsight, it was the right decision, because it allowed us to communicate to partners, to fans, that games weren't taking place. And as a business, it encouraged us to shift focus from physical events to digital and media. And a lot of time was spent on media partnerships. And you might have seen that we have renewed our relationship with Sky Sports, which is one of the biggest UK sports broadcasters, and have also created and worked with them to form our own channel. So we have an NFL dedicated 24/7 channel on Sky Sports, which sits along the same as football and cricket, and supports our objective of trying to become more mainstream. That has enabled us to provide partners with other opportunities from a visibility perspective. And then we've also entered into more free-to-air agreements, because I think you need a pay TV and free-to-air. So we work with BBC, and the new addition is Channel 5, to create, again, more compelling content, which you can monetize and commercialize. And then digital. I think everyone will agree that they've had to rely on digital assets more and be a little bit more creative and work with partners to really understand what they're looking for. And it's a challenge on both sides, because partners are probably struggling in the same vein as every business is during this pandemic. And so trying to identify what it is that makes a partnership successful, what you're looking to achieve, how you can achieve it, and also making sure that you have strong KPIs, so everyone is accountable, is really, really important, because every pound matters, every dollar matters. So you have to make sure that you're maximizing that, and that's kind of our responsibility.
So it's safe to say that you keep busy even though the games aren't taking place?
Yeah, definitely working as hard, if not harder, at home during a pandemic.
If we look ahead to 2021 and 2022, what can we look forward to in regards to NFL UK?
So we will bounce back with a bang and bring the London games back to London, back to Tottenham and Wembley. And then we're in the process at the moment of doing a little bit of partner consultancy. So we want to work with our partners to gain their insight about what they would like to see us do. And I think we can use this opportunity to gain their counsel. And that's important from a commercial perspective, because then you have a stronger guide and rationale about what you should be doing, and not necessarily requiring any commitment, financial commitment from them, but using them to help shape your strategy is a good thing. And so we will be doing things around Super Bowl, and then we have draft, and then our off season is typically when we gather content, and then celebrating again, kickoff, which comes around pretty quickly back in September, beginning of September, before our games take place in October and November. So keep your eyes peeled.
For sure. I would also like to pick your brain about the sports industry as a whole.
Okay.
There's a disproportionate amount of men versus women in the industry, especially in managerial positions. Why do you think that is? And do you see a change happening anytime soon?
I have noticed a change since I started my career. I probably am more fortunate than others in that every organization I've worked with has been fairly balanced. At the NFL, on our senior management team, it's pretty much a 50-50 split between male and female. So from that lens, I think we're governed properly as a business. There's definitely more that can be done. I spend a lot of time doing this kind of thing and supporting and helping people trying to get into the industry. And I hope with continued exposure, awareness and support about women in sport, but not just women in sport. I think there's a big thing about diversity and inclusion at the moment, and that is of equal importance. So encouraging everyone that they have an equal opportunity is really, really important. And I will do everything that I can to support those people on their journey.
If I may quote you, you have said that I love what I do, but it doesn't mean that it's always easy. So the question on that is, has there been any bumps on the road? And if so, how did you overcome these?
There's always bumps in the road. I think going to university, getting a good education and learning about sport and business is fantastic. It's a good grounding. But I don't think it ever really prepares you for work and corporate life. There are things that you learn on the job, and experience does help with that. I think generally what I've learned is that business, when you look at businesses, there are always politics, internal, external politics, and that's something that you just have to try and navigate. And you can't be taught that. You have to experience it and take some of those experiences and lessons with you to make sure that moving forward, you don't fall foul of previous traps, and you use those experience to help you find a path that delivers what you want to try and achieve. And that's kind of like the biggest hurdle that I think throughout any organization, and every organization has politics and challenges. It's just trying to remain calm, remain focused, and have that goal in sight throughout, so that you don't deviate or fall off track. You always come back to that goal, and do everything that you can to succeed.
I see. With all this experience that you have, what would be your best advice for young people who want to work in the sports management industry?
Good question. I think during COVID especially, people are becoming a lot more open to being approached about things and helping out others. There has been a lot of redundancies, a lot of people out of work because of the pandemic. And I think from a sports perspective or general industry perspective, we should all pull together to help one another. Be that set up Zoom calls and have conversations like we're doing right now, use LinkedIn as a platform and try and connect with as many people as you can. And then try and stand out from the crowd. Like, I'm sure everyone is trying to be creative with finding a job, but standing out and showing an innovative approach is probably key, and making sure that you are doing things that are true to your own personality and characteristic, but is trying to make a difference and shine.
I think that's great advice. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to mention? It could be about you, your career, or the NFL UK, for example.
Good question. I don't think so. I feel like I've told you my life story. Hopefully it's been of interest, but I would just I'm a big supporter of helping out people get into the industry, because I think, especially when I was younger, unless you knew people in the industry, it was really, really hard and a challenge to get your foot into the door. I was lucky. It was good timing for me when I approached Octagon. I didn't know anyone there, but I was very fortunate to get the opportunity. So I think don't give up. Be mindful that people have their own day jobs and have responsibilities, but keep on chasing them. And eventually, hopefully, you will get an open door and get an opportunity to work in an environment that you love.
Yeah. I'm sure you've met many interesting people throughout your career. If you could choose the next guest on this podcast, who would you suggest?
Another great question. Gosh, there are so many people. A person that I think would be incredible for you to learn from and hear her experience would probably be Jan Patterson. I worked with her at the British Olympic Association. She is an incredible lady and is heading up the sports project in Neon. And she just has a fountain of experience and would be a great guest for your program.
Thank you so much for being on the Sports Management Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Sports Management Podcast. Do you have thoughts or ideas about this podcast, or do you know someone that I should interview next? Please reach out to me on sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or visit my website sportsmanagementpodcast.com. If you prefer social media, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at sportsmpodcast.